Hello, I'm Alan Libsey from the Financial Times Lex team, and I want to welcome you all joining us on this webinar on transforming operations and the customer experience. I'm glad to be moderating this discussion today, and I hope you enjoy it. It should be a nice, interesting discussion. And I'd like to thank our host, Ephesoft, for arranging this event today. And in a moment, I'll introduce you to our host. But first, I better do some housekeeping for all of you. We will be taking questions from the audience, and we will have time at the end to address as many of your queries as possible. I may bunch up some of the questions because they may all fit into the same general subject, so bear with me. Now, this webinar is being recorded, and you will be able to see it later on the FT site in the future. So one other thing is that in a couple of minutes, we're going to do a poll, a quick poll of the audience, and we've got one or two questions for you. But first, I'd like to introduce you to our panel. First, we have our host, Stephen Bowles. He's the Senior Vice President and on Strategy and Evangelism at Ephesoft. Then we have James Platt, who's Chief Operating Officer at Aon. Then Astrid Stange, who is the Chief Operating Officer at AXA Group. And last but not least, Karim Tomac, who's the Global Chief Analytics Officer at ING Group. What I'd like to do now is perhaps do a quick poll of the audience, and let's try this out. Are we ready, poll team? Great. Now, I'm assuming that you can see the questions, but if you can't, I'm going to read them out anyway. So I don't actually have the poll question right here, but I'm assuming you can see them. How difficult is it, the data challenge? How difficult is it for your organization to manage, analyze, and use data effectively? That's our first question. That should show up on your screen somewhere. Okay, and so we're collecting the results of these now. And we'll know in a moment, I hope, what the answers are. I hope I get to see them. These poll questions are designed really to get us going and think about a little bit about the topics that we are going to touch on today. I hope the weather is nice wherever all of you are out in the audience. I'm sitting in London, and it is a lovely, lovely day. Okay, here's some of the answers coming in. The answer for most of you, how difficult is it? Very difficult, 20%. Fairly difficult, 59%, so there's quite a few people in the middle. Fairly easy, 18%.
Wow.
And 1% said very easy. So most of you are having some difficulty dealing with the data challenge and how much of it is out there. And I guess that doesn't really surprise me. It is the title of today's thing. And I think talking to my panelists before this, it is pretty clear that it comes up a lot on both sides of the equation, whether you're the customer or the provider. I think can we move to the next poll question, which is, artificial intelligence to the rescue. How can artificial intelligence be used to capture and amplify the power of data and documents? Is intelligent document processing, is it having an impact, and which processes and parts? So in particular, which processes in particular lend themselves to automated data capture? I'm hoping that is clear, and pretty soon we're going to have some answers.
It's like we need some more coffee this morning, huh?
I know, it's coming through. I blame the tech. It's so slow these days.
Yeah, damn AI.
Here we go. Okay, the answers are coming in. So custom onboarding is 68%, as most people said that. Mailroom, just 6%. And is that records or RexCords? I assume that's records. 23%. So a large chunk of you said pretty much custom onboarding. There's one last category, accounts payable, but that was small, only 2%. So most of you seem to be finding AI is best for custom onboarding. Some of you on records itself. The rest spread around mailroom and accounts, with the lesser stuff. Okay. That's interesting. And now we have some sort of framework of how to begin, because really we'll start, I think, or do we have another poll question? I thought that was it. I'll ask my specialist here.
I think those two were.
I think it was just it, right? Okay. Good. Okay. What I'd like to do now that we have a sense of the audience, would be nice to hear from Stephen, talk a little bit about what's going on at Ephesoft and what we're looking to do today. So it'd be great to have a little introductory chat from you, Stephen, and tell us your thoughts.
Yeah, so but before we get started, if you aren't familiar with Ephesoft, we're a leader in the intelligent document processing space. Been around since about 2010 and provide automation solutions for all different types of financial services and banking solutions around customer onboarding, mailroom automation, and some back office functions like AP and correspondence handling and things like that. We thought we'd bring to the table the AI and data discussion. It's something that we hear every day out in the field from our prospects, customers, and partners. And folks are still having difficulty handling the amount of data that's coming in. And for us, it's specifically data within documents. But obviously, there's a broader problem as well. But that's how we kind of crafted today's session, to give some insight on best practices, what's working, what's not working, and really give some insight on how to solve those tough problems. So back to you, Alan.
Okay, thanks, Stephen. So what I'd like to do is open up the discussion with one of our panelists today. And Astrid, I've spoken to everybody beforehand, and I have some idea really what's on everybody's mind. But Astrid was making some very good, they all make very good, excellent points about, just coping with the amount of data. You're a big insurer and investment manager, you have many functions. But what we talked about, I think, Astrid, was how to use the data best, because you've got plenty of data. What do you think is most important thing you can get out of the technology available, because you've got lots of data and you've got lots of technology.
Yes, for us, the learning is a little bit, and of course, when we're talking about document analysis and AI, and we're talking about a lot of experts, a lot of technology, for us, it's much more about seeing how to build really a data culture. Because data culture means that the whole organization, and that not just specialists for us, so specialists who are really to the topic, who are data analysts or data engineers, who are dealing with question of data management, seeing the value of data. Because I think for an organization, and we are roughly 165,000 people globally, the question is, how can we motivate and how we can bring value to every one of our employees, but also our customers with data. And this doesn't happen just with experts and with small centers of excellence that are trying to get more and more traction, but it's really the question about how to get all of us behind that. And this is the challenge we are working on and thinking about that, how to transfer that to our people, how to make it a topic in the organization, and how to scale data and the usage of these technologies.
And that for you, you were saying that's internal and external, right? So it's as much as anything, it's the presentation to some of your workers, right? Your key employees, because if they don't understand it, how are they going to get the customer to understand it? Am I right?
Exactly, and I think it starts first of all, of course, with your people internally, because they have to understand that there's something in for them. Because when you can talk, and we have a lot of lectures about data, webinars about data, you see the newspaper about data. So everyone is talking about data, AI is amazing about that. But the real stuff is for, I would say, our people, for example, in the claims department, and perhaps we will talk later about what are processes that are essential about data analytics, it's for us that. But to understand, hey, what's in for me as a person? How does data makes my life easier? And I think this is exactly the discussion we need to force that, because that we need people who are using data, who are collecting data, who make sure that they have clean data. So this is, for me, one of the biggest challenge for organizations. Because I have to say that it should not sound that it's simple to use expertise or technology, but to make it really at scale, to bring the whole organization behind, this is really a challenge.
Mm-hmm. And now I'll just move over to James now, because we were talking about a concept that that is popular in the tech area, this no-code, low-code concept. Maybe talk to us a little bit about that and how that might be of use more and more in these days, particularly with everyone out of the office.
So, Simon, look, it's interesting to hear Astrid around this whole point around the data culture, because I'll come on to low code, no code, but I want to say I think that point is critically important to us. If you want to use data, you have to have everybody seeing the value of it. We have a lot of very poor data sometimes because people don't necessarily put great data into systems. And by the way, I was amazed in your poll that the amount of people, I think it was 18% that found it fairly easy to get the data. I'd say we found it still quite hard. And that really is, that gets onto low code, no code, which is, a lot of the people on this call, I'm sure, see the difficulty we had in technology a few years ago, where, and I'm talking probably the 90s, 2000s, when it was hard to do things. I think the beauty of technology today is that using things like no code and low code, which for the audience, and I only found out about this in the last few years, is basically systems that need configuring rather than you have to code. I mean, that's all it means. So, but through those systems, we're able to actually have a lot more people follow digital paths and put data in, and take processes which have a lot of data in them and actually turn them into processes we can collect data. So for me, that no code, low code technology is one of the steps. It's not AI in itself, but it's one of the steps that we need to be able to collect data that we can then use. And for a firm like us, we have a lot of small transactions, but we also have a lot of large, complicated transactions. And step one in this data journey is being able to get it in and find ways to make sure it comes in a structured way.
So are we talking about more in terms of ease of use, making things easy and more intuitive for your staff, the workers within, or are we talking about making it easier, and I hope so, for customers as well? Where is the greatest impact for what you're talking about?
No, so it's a great question. Both. I mean, if you take one of our core processes, which is, when a client has a risk that they want to get protected for, they need to provide a lot of information. So a lot of information about their historic losses, a lot of information about their exposures. And obviously that information comes on, frankly, Excel files, comes in PDF documents. So how do you collect all that information from the client in an easy way? How do you then manage that? And then, the next real job of us would be to provide that information in a structured way to Astrid and AXA or another insurer. So that whole process, as you can imagine, has lots and lots of complicated data that you have to capture, deal with, and manage. And that's where things like low-code, no-code technology are pretty helpful.
Now, I'll move over to Karen, because Karen and I were also talking about it's the complication of the data, and they across borders, across states. Each system, each regulatory system has different kind of documentation. I'm sure everybody has had this problem, and it doesn't really matter whether you automate it. You'll end up with all sorts of configurations. Karen, talk to us a little bit about some of the frustrations of dealing with that across, particularly in Europe.
Yeah, I think thanks, Alan. I think the important thing to understand is really when you're in a global operation, right? Every local country has a different set of requirements about the documents needed from the customers to actually, for example, simple credit application, let alone a mortgage application, requires a whole set of different documents when you're in Germany versus, say, you're in Italy. And the documents themselves have different levels of complication. Some of them are presented in terms of, let's say, very tabular structured kind of a data piece that is easier to, let's say, pass through an OCR software and then extract the data out of. But if you look at ID cards or some sort of legal documentation that is to be submitted for the clients themselves, obviously every jurisdiction has a different kind of watermarking, a different kind of imagery. So that kind of blurs the, let's say, the data source, makes the accuracy of the data extraction so much more harder. And really, when we're talking about extracting and having a certain level of accuracy in that process itself, you're looking at somewhere between 70 to, let's say, 90% accuracy, depending on what kind of document you're looking at. And so let's say that everything went well, you attain a 90% accuracy of some source across the board. You still have to deal with, okay, how do you then create a intelligent system that would kind of either collect all this information together and make sense out of it and kind of act upon it, let's say, for fraud detection, and create an early warning system for that. And say, okay, all these paper-based applications are automated, but with a variety of level of accuracy on these data extraction processes, having an AI system that is truly scalable and really intelligent, as we are quite far from that. You need to have still localized implementations of AI systems that then together has to collectively feed into a global operation. And just saying that, easy to say, but just you can imagine the complexity of it.
I'm just curious, when you say 70 to 90% accuracy, what would you say is the minimum amount of accuracy that you need to have? Because I'm guessing that even 90%, that 10% miss could be really, really, really important and get you into trouble. So tell us a little, have you got any sort of examples of just how a little bit of inaccuracy can make for a lot of headache?
Yeah, I mean, I think, for example, again, just use case I just gave you, which is a credit application process. Let's say everything is perfect, the papers are capturing every single information accurately, there's nothing missing in those documents, but the system does not recognize a piece of information. And imagine declining the credit application because the system did not really capture the information correctly. It's an inconvenience for the customer and a business lost for the company. And that's not a good place to be for anyone. And so, I mean, there's no minimum accuracy. I would rather say as maximum accuracy as possible that we need to shoot for. But obviously that requires eventually for that, let's say, 10% of the cases, manual intervention. And so the system needs to have obviously exception criteria that is going to be handled by somebody down on the ground in the field who then has to still connect with the customer. So that is, so when we're talking about AI, I think everybody thinks AI is automating everything under the sun. The reality is quite far from that.
Yeah. And Astrid, do you have these kind of hassles as well, or worries as well, that come back to you, percolate up to you from other parts of your
I think what Karim said, I think today we are in the situation that we have, when we are going to go more to local applications. So for that reason, you cannot transfer everything from one country to the other without adaptation, so that it's clear. But that means also for us that we're thinking much more about, of course, when we capture data, about standardization, so that we're really trying to define in that way global data architecture, so that we are able at the end bringing stuff together, bringing sources together. But this is a big amount of effort, so a lot of people have to work on that. That is not just given by, as you say, it's a fantastic AI algorithm, let's apply it. So it's a lot of huge work to do. And of course, again, data, the underlying data, I think is important to structure in that way. So there's a lot of work to do before you are applying AI. And I think a lot of people dream of algorithms that are doing that everything on their own. So a little bit this scary scenario. Some people feel it's scary, but I think we are today still far away from that. So I fully agree, Karim. So this is also, of course, in a global organization, a big challenge. And of course, it's also the source for a lot of work that we have all to have done in an organization.
Yeah. Yep. Alan, I think the challenge is in data availability. I think the challenge is organizations definitely have enough data. It's the lack of structure, context, and then linkage. That linkage that might fix that missing piece of data if you can combine or link documents or data together. But over 80% of that data within documents is dark data. Some organizations don't know what they don't know, right? Where's that missing piece of information that they wish they had, or that they would have processed as documents come into the gate? So
you might want to explain what dark data is. For maybe there might be people in the audience. What do you mean by dark data?
So take for example, an application comes in. They might harvest 10 pieces of data from that application, but there might be 100 pieces of data within the document that might be interesting or important in the future for future initiatives. It sits in a repository, no one has access to it, and it's essentially dark to the organization.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so that's kind of been a focus in the market, is how do we get to that dark data and make it clean, make it usable, and available to your data science teams.
Okay, so let me ask a sort of wrap up question for this area a little bit. Is how much time, James, Astrid, Karim, are you spending cleaning data?
So just on this one, I mean, this is the irony to me of this conversation and the cleaning data is we take all of our best machine learning and AI. I like the way Karim described it, right? It's not some sort of wonderful thing. And a lot of the use of it goes in making the data better, not in using the data for some great insight. We apply much more on searching, finding patterns, mapping client names, just trying to understand, finding that dark data that Steve's talking about. That's where a lot of that AI effort goes. So it's pretty tough, I would say.
Yeah.
as we find this.
Yes.
Yeah. The funniest thing is like this has been, and when I started my career, the issue, and everybody said 80% of the work of a data scientist goes into dealing with the data. Hey, 20 years later, we're still in the same place. 80% of the time still goes into manipulating and working with the data.
Because getting
Absolutely.
the answers isn't good enough. You need to know, is it the right answer? And is it giving you the, what is the question?
Getting samples, right? I mean, you can't have 10 samples and have AI work correctly. You need, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of clean data samples. So where do you get all that pure, clean data? So.
Yeah.
But perhaps let's come back to the starting remark from my side on culture, data culture, because it's exactly that what happened in the past. Because I think now we're all talking about this new of data as the new oil and whatever these metaphors are. But the reality is also that I think in the financial industry, of course, these are data industries by definition for forever. But in the past, it was not understood by that because it had also not been these opportunities to do that. So for that reason, of course, in the past, it was a little bit about gathering, doing something in Excel files, or by the way, when we're thinking about how much data is really on PDF or on paper. So that is really something where you see it's dark data. And by the way, the people had the feeling in the past, okay, I pick some stuff, I do some analysis, and then I can do about, I don't know, risk scoring, or in our case, perhaps defining fraud patterns or something like that. But it was a huge effort on that. But people have really focused by hypothesis on something. Today, and for that reason, we are still in there. We have to train our people to understand the better the data quality is, the better the results are, of course. So it's, Karen, the same here. I would say 80-20. So it's about 80% preparation, cleaning, doing that stuff, and then running the rest on finding the fantastic new insights.
Yeah, same with the training on our side too. I think we need to still train our people to understand, data is the new oil, yes, but you still make decisions for the most of the time based on cleaned and derived data, right? Because the insights from the data is what matters. People still think, okay, if you get a data dump, hey, my job is done, but they realize, oh, wow, okay, I got the data dump, so what now? How do I get my answer?
Well, it's more, or is the answer even correct? Because I'm not even sure the data is right. That's more of an issue.
Huge, because the data is really clean, right? What happened to that those documents where data was missing that might have been really valuable?
Yeah,
it's a huge challenge. Yeah.
But equally, just one thing you said, which I think is a cultural challenge for us, is if every time we have to try to get our teams to also avoid the data's not perfect, so I don't believe the answer, because the data often isn't going to be, but it's better than no data, and it's certainly more insightful. So it's almost a balance for us around, hey, the data's pretty good, it gives pretty good answers. Not always the data's perfect and the answer's perfect. And I think that's it goes back to Astrid's original point. That's a really hard concept for a lot of people to work through.
Okay, so basically making the compromise that it isn't going to be perfect, but we need to accept that we've got a pretty good idea now. Can I ask a different question? Because we have been discussing trawling through documents, PDF, even if they're electronic, they're still documents. But I guess at some point, there are no documents. There will be no documents. And how much influence can, I don't know, insurers, companies have on the regulators, not in a bad way, but to help guide, the collection of data that would be more useful for society? Is there a role there, or is it really, sorry, you just have to take what the regulators give you?
No, definitely. And I think in particular, AXA, we are engaging in these discussions. For us in particular, ethical usage of data is important. So what is really the data we should use, how to use it, to apply that, what is about algorithm we are developed. I think there's a huge debate on that. And of course, I think this is something we're discussing about society. The other thing is when you're thinking about society, we also have to talk about standardization of data. because we have talked about how difficult it is to use data in one company. Think about that, how much is even more difficult to bring, for example, when we're thinking about society, and health is a big topic. So we before that we have started to talk about the situation about COVID, so we are in a pandemic situation. And of course, also to understand this pandemic situation, to understand what are the right things to do also for the future, what are short-term things, mid-term things. It's all about data. You look onto that. And to bring this data together means, if you want to do that on a global basis, across countries, in a country, you need data standardization. And I think this is also an important topic to drive and to bring industries, but also regulators to the table and think about that, because that means also for the sake of the society to move forward. So standardization is a very, very important topic.
Alan, I think you hit on a point. Documents are just a human construct to view data, right? A standardized, laid out format.
Yes.
Each of us could look at an invoice, a piece of correspondence, and a contract and know immediately what they are because we're used to those constructs. I think there's a lot of technology that will start to shift away from that as systems get smarter and AI use gets heavier and heavier. So,
no, and what I guess I should move us on to a little bit about is, you know, the employee and the customer experience, and you know how these things can make life easier on both sides of the relationship. And one thing that came up in the poll was this onboarding. People are finding it this is a good, I think, an easier area for them. But what about the rest? Some of these credit referencing, anti-money laundering checks, know your KYC, know your customer requirements. How is AI helping in this regard to pick up anomalies, potential problems? What do you think? Astrid, you're nodding. I'll start with you.
Of course. So one thing is that you can use, of course, NLP or other technologies to read that, to understand that, to extract it, as we have discussed on that. For us, it was a question about do we have to go a step further? And in our industry, it's all about contracts. So James, I guess this is the basis of our business. When you think about that, to some extent, we have contracts with all the terms and conditions that are 50 or 100 pages still now. So what are you doing here? And I think it's a pain when we're thinking about that for customers, but also for the employees, because to distill the data, to see the coverages, what is important when you are on the phone. And for that reason, we are on the way thinking about how to digitize the product. So how to bring the product not ending up anymore with PDFs or with written data or with Word documents or whatever you are, this is a usual standard today, but how to put terms and conditions, the standard clauses into a software, and then be able on that way to automate the full value chain. And that has a massive impact, and I think a lot of advantages for the customers, because it's easy to understand. I think it's easy for them when they call into at a call center asking, hey, is this covered? I'm in a claim situation, I need support. Do I get it? When? So that it's getting faster. And of course, we can digitize the full value chain. That means also for our people, for our internal processes. So this is something we are thinking about. So this is much more thinking about how to stop PDF, how to stop documents, and bring in right from minute one into a digitized version.
Any other thoughts, James, Karen?
Go on, Karen.
Yeah, I think for us, I'll start with where we want to be, or where we actually thrive to be, which is we are there to make our customers and customers' lives better, and the businesses to thrive and grow. And so when you start with that kind of starting point and say, hey, we're going to provide a service, no matter what the service is that the customers need, in a way that will enable them and make their lives better, which, by the way, was the early Silicon Valley days, kind of the technology focus when the companies actually built solutions back in the early 2000s. If you look at where Google started, Amazon started, Yahoo started, they all came from a point where they all thrive to actually solve a social problem, something that the people needed, and use technology to bring that to the field, and really make their lives better. So we all try to do the same thing, and obviously it starts with providing solutions using data in an intelligent way that will allow us to provide a much better interface and interaction with the brand in a way to kind of provide services seamlessly that actually will make everything that the customer wants from us in a very easy experience that is also trusted, right? So that's where the KYC comes in. That's where all the AML and fraud detection and prevention methods come in. And so at the end of the day, we need to do what I just said in a way that is fully trusted, because we are a bank. And that customers trust the brand, and customers expect that we provide these services in a seamless fashion. Easy said than done, but obviously AI plus other technologies are allowing us to be able to provide these services in a fashion that differentiates us as a brand.
James?
No, I mean, I think this is a big use for all of us, right? In the sense of these tasks which have been painful for our clients and customers, we can make easier. I mean, if you know, the simple one for us, just a simple example is we issue a lot of insurance certificates. You know, a lot of our clients need certificates to be able to carry out their business. And that's been a painful process. Lots of data coming in from different places, trying to work out where we need them and where we should put the effort. And actually, by using pretty thoughtful AI, we've been sort of able to halve the time, halve the amount of effort, not just for our colleagues, but also the clients that sort of need in that process. You know, claims has been a classic one that I know a lot of our industry has looked at, but where we are able to apply machine learning now is looking for insurers and working with insurers of where they're likely to face litigation. And actually those claims, then they can then spend longer on those, knowing that they're going to be difficult. So not only does the insurer that we're working with get a better experience, but their client does too, because actually if they were likely to get litigation there, that's worth us spending effort. So by allowing us to focus, we're definitely creating a much, much better customer experience. So
that's a bit, so it's predictive in that sense, rather than restrictive, rather than a kind of, I guess the right word is compliance check. It's more of a thinking process properly, like AI should be, really.
Pattern finding. I mean, if you come down to it, and this is where, and I say, Karen, I think you mentioned it earlier, it does some pretty simple things well, right? So it's not that we're taking over the world of intelligence, but it searches, it finds patterns, it matches, and it maps, right? I mean, those are the tasks that AI does so well with data.
Brilliant. Okay, that's very interesting. I wanted to think a little bit also about not just that kind of thing, but just how are the technicalities now working? Because one thing I know that Karam and I talked a little bit about is the cloud, and using it and getting the most out of it. Karam, do you want to expand on that point?
Yeah, I think that's opportunity and a challenge, obviously. In the European context, we have to make sure that all the European rules and regulations are abided by when we are talking about the use of public cloud. And that, having said that, and that's assuming that that is done in a way that the cloud providers, public cloud providers, are actually able to meet that requirement. The cloud operation is a way to scale, and it actually complements the existing systems that we have in place. And especially for analytics, it's a way to scale via the compute capability that the cloud gives us. to really scale the AI applications, because as you know, some of you in the audience might also know that deep learning algorithms require a tremendous amount of compute power and also still tremendous amounts of data to train. And essentially, with that requirement, you need to be able to have access to hardware solutions out there that will allow you to gain speed in doing this in a reasonable amount of time. Mm-hmm. And so, I happen to have a little bit of luxury of having the hardware environments that the bank has that we can use to train our algorithms on. But if you look at it across the board, across an industry, not all companies have that. And for analytics units and data scientists to be able to build algorithms that are complex, sophisticated, and learning, self-learning, to create the kind of scale we are expecting from AI solutions to be able to provide the services customers need, we gotta have to have this compute power scalability, and that is now no longer there. If you're looking at a normal amount of investment in these infrastructures on-prem, we will quickly hit a point where that will no longer be financially reasonable or even logical. And so public cloud is an extension of on-prem analytics capabilities that are going to be required going forward to stay competitive. If you're looking at financial services companies like ours, to be competitive against big techs and others that are accessing this capability freely. Even the fintechs, I look at it as a leveling field between fintechs and the banks, incumbent banks, to be able to have the same level of competitive platform capabilities to be able to provide the services. Because if you look at a fintech, a fintech comes in and says, okay, well, I can use the public cloud capabilities to scale with no legacy infrastructure dependency that they have to deal with. And so obviously they can scale. And so if you don't have the same kind of scalability to be able to compete, then you will fall behind. And that's why a lot of people talk about, okay, fintechs are unfairly competing against the incumbents. Yeah, but now we have a leveling kind of a technology out there that we should all be able to use. Again, pending, like I said in the beginning, abiding by the EU rules and regulations.
But I guess I should ask this, maybe it's been dealt with over the years, is the security aspect. I mean, they can jump in, they have relatively cheap entry into your business, but there will always be the security questions that come up for them. Is that any sort of an advantage for ING, AXA, and Aon?
Well, I think
I mean, your investment in that is really what I mean.
Right. Of course. I mean, I think if you look at the current state of cloud, there is even an argument around cloud is probably even more secure than on-prem operations. The main question is that there is an increasing amount of regulation and guidance that comes from EU in the way to use cloud that will abide by EU laws from data privacy security perspectives. So that piece is common to all. It's not just fintechs have to abide by it, or ING or others have to abide by it. Everybody has to abide by it. So that's a common playing ground. Given that is accomplished and enabled, I do believe cloud security is at some point even better than on-prem solutions we could even imagine.
I think too, Alan, that there are so many certifications required now. So if you look in the US or the EU, in order to even play in the game or talk to somebody like these folks that are on the panel, you have to have certifications, you have to comply with regulations. So not only is the provider providing a layer of security, but also the vendor or the SaaS company has to have icing on top of that cake as well.
Yeah.
But I have to say, from my perspective, and first of all, and I believe that security in the future is a big differentiator, and it becomes not anymore a kind of table stake. It becomes in the future, I think, a customer demand, because when you look onto that ransom attacks, I would say today happen on a daily basis, and because it's a big business in there, because already in this industry you are on SaaS applications, okay? You are not anymore on guys trying to hack you. This is really a big industry where you can buy the software inclusive the communication pack and then attack companies. For that reason, I believe, of course, size and companies that have money to invest into security can make the difference and will make the difference. I have to say, we have also started in our company the journey to cloud years ago. And of course, the first thing what you say when you're talking about cloud, it's about by the way, when you go to data and AI, you have to be on cloud, as you say, Karem. There's no way out. So for that reason, I have to say there's even the tools and the methodologies are on cloud. So for that reason, you have to. This is a must. But of course, there is a discussion about how secure is your on-premise infrastructure and the cloud. You can say, yes, the big providers are offering protection already, but this is not enough. When you think about when you're bringing more and more applications there, perhaps also infrastructure we can bring there. So you think about that, it's a part of your infrastructure. You have to take care of that. And by the way, you have to learn about that. So everything what you have seen on on-premise, it's not gone because you say, hey guys, now the big guys are taking care of my data. This is not enough. You have to build that exactly there. By the way, you have to train your people on that. Because a lot of people also saying, hey, fantastic, I go to the cloud, I do that, I just, as you say, learning a little bit of that, put data on that. This is not enough. You have really to be, security is a big, big issue there. And by the way, you have also to invest into security on public cloud. So this is not where you can say, hey, I'm out with that. And this is a huge investment. So for that reason, I'm convinced that this will be a differentiator in the future.
Could I, James, before you say anything, could we address this subject also in terms of scaling operations, which I think Karem and Astrid has alluded to, because we've had a lot of questions in the audience about scaling operations and keeping the customer experience. How do all of you handle that, scaling operations and the customer experience?
Well, look, just down on this, I mean, I think in some ways, I mean, Karen went through it a little bit, the cloud allows anybody to scale pretty effectively and pretty efficiently, it really does. I think, I mean, if you take the comments, so I think the other panelists are all saying, I'm concerned actually that with a combination of security, meaning that having a completely open structure is vulnerable. But I'm really concerned as well on data. There's a lot of growing data nationalism. You know, we talk about privacy and rules, but data nationalism is becoming a real thing where data can't be moved in the same way it could be because of privacy and other regulatory rules. So the irony here to me is that the technology to allow you to scale is becoming the easier part. And this is where, if you play back our conversation, that part's okay. You can get cloud, you can get the technology, but dealing with the culture of your teams and your people, dealing with the security, because, you know, genuinely, I think for any of us on this call, we probably don't sleep great at night worrying about some of these things. And then dealing with this increasing privacy rules that you have to make. Any firm that can do that, I think will succeed. But the problem on the privacy and the data nationalism is, I suspect we have to build completely new data structures for a global firm, at least, where we're keeping data local, we're looking at it globally, we're managing it differently, we're not managing as a single pool. So the complexity increases by what you've got to do, and the technology enables it. So hopefully these things go together, but it's quite worrying. And I mean, I'd be interested in the other panelists' views on how they see the future.
Well, you've already scared me by suggesting we need AI just to clean up the data so that people can understand how to use the AI for the data.
Now you need efforts around sanitizing the data, right, James? So you can use it cross-border.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's lots of issues.
I would also make sure that we are differentiating between data and compute, because data has gravity. And I think, James, you rightfully said that. wherever the data is generated, it will stay there. I don't foresee infrastructures and data in totality moving to cloud in any shape or form. I foresee more intelligent use of cloud in the sense of extending the compute capabilities and maybe application deployment using modern CI/CD pipelines to actually deploy applications once it is built globally, deploy locally via the cloud. But yes, we have to be careful about what is it that we are putting on the cloud and how are we using the cloud. And I strongly agree with Astrid saying, let's not forget about the amount of training and amount of change kind of management even needed to be able to support cloud operations, because we go from, let's say, an on-prem maintenance kind of team to a cloud app maintenance team that needs to be there. So it's not, there are certain things that really, when we think about, oh, the cloud is going to decrease the cost, it does not really, unless you do it intelligently. Yeah.
Could I ask one last question, because we've had a bunch of questions about the scaling and customer experience, which we've addressed, I think, I hope. And thank you for those questions, audience. But also one other area, which I think might be a little moot because you're all senior executives. The question is this: how do you convince senior management in all units, commercial, risk, finance, et cetera, to embrace a culture of data? Is that a problem in your respective firms?
Maybe I can jump in. We do have a company-wide data fluency effort that is one of the biggest focus areas of the senior management board level down. That is focused on increasing the data literacy across the board at all levels. And we have trained thousands of colleagues in the company. We continue to do so, and that's really the highest priority we have. That's something that I own as a personal kind of target to achieve, to increase the data literacy, data accuracy, understanding of the data itself, but also why do we have analytics? How to use analytics? What does fact-based decisioning mean? How do we get there? That's a continuous effort, ongoing effort that will continue into the future as a massive undertaking, but we take it extremely seriously. It's one of the biggest focus areas for the company.
Astrid, what do you think about that? Convincing senior management. Do you have a lot of convincing to do? Do they not care about data?
Yes, it's a journey. So we have started the journey years ago, but if we're going, and I would say this is not, of course, on a rational basis. Everyone is on data, of course, because also of this, because everything is hyped around data. This new oil stories for years, of course, the Silicon Valley stories, Amazon, and everything around that. So, but of course, as we have discussed here, it's a tough journey. Huh? This is not just coming by, hey, yes, we are there, but you have to do a lot of things. You have to invest a lot of things. You have to change your personal behavior on that. And for that reason, as Kam said, I think it is an ongoing work. You have always to work on that, to put on the table. And I think it's important in an organization to have role models on that. And of course, it starts on the senior management, but people saying, hey, I have understood, I want to do that. And we have in our organization started with different entities where the CEOs have taken really this started from the CEO, taking the responsibility on that and really saying, hey, this is important. This is important for myself. Why? And then starting going into the organization. And what we see is we are able to move the organization. So for that reason, again, it's not just a training saying, hey, you have to attend. No, this is really about leadership. And it's about, I would say, data leadership. You have to show up as a senior manager.
Would you say, just a quick question, would you say, what percentage technology versus people? You think the focus is 70% on people, 30%? Is the technology there, or what's your gut on that?
So if you ask me, it's 70% people, because the technology, I have to say, cloud, again, this is not easy to implement cloud, but when you see about that, and of course, when you not bring all your legacy to cloud and have to re-engineer stuff and making that happen, but when you think about starting with AI, they are using data, it's available now. Experts, not easy, but can find them. But really to scale it in an organization, to make it, and by the way, data for me makes sense when we're really talking about an industrialized application, a usage of data, so that I'm not running these so-called pilots or POCs, where people are gathering 6 months of data and then we run it once and everyone is happy. But when you think about it, you have to do it on a daily basis. And by the way, this is also about real-time data. There's really the value. And so for that reason, this is really data usage industrialized. This is my understanding from really when we're saying, hey, yes, we've got it. And I think, of course, also for AXA, we are not at that level as we're saying, hey, we're running everywhere with our data in an industrialized ways. Everyone is on that. So for that reason, this is, I think, the biggest challenge. Of course, expertise is important, so I don't want to say this is not the relevant piece, but I think really to make that happen, this is the big chunk to move.
Yeah, to me too, I think 80% even, I would say, mindset change. Yeah. It takes way longer to change a mindset than to get on the cloud and deploy an application on the cloud. And so, I agree. Technology is relatively easier, but people that are going to use that technology in the right way, build the right applications, build the tools and infrastructures and interfaces that customers will adopt and use and see value in, that requires a massive mindset change that takes longer.
I think the irony to me is that I think with all that people read about data, even senior leaders imagine somehow it's a bit of a panacea. They like the output. And actually, I think this conversation, Alan, to me it's really hard work at every level. And therefore, we need senior managers to accept that and understand it's hard work.
You don't mean this panel. This panel is not hard work.
Yeah, no,
it's easy. Listen, thank you all for participating today. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Steve, I wonder if you have any final quick comments before we close off.
No, this has been great. It's something that I see every day. It's about the people, right? The technology works, but the challenge is typically the cultural change, as Astrid mentioned. Been a great panel. I thank everybody for attending.
Okay, great. Thanks to everyone, James, Astrid, Karim, and of course Steve, for participating today on the panel, and I think a lively, engaging, and interesting conversation. I hope you all enjoyed it, and thank you very much for joining us. That's it from us. Bye-bye.